Hey, this is Jeremy, and it's time to talk about Nosferatu.
Nosferatu.
All right, shit. Let me just say, first off, this movie accomplishes everything it sets out to do. Did it need to do it? That's another question. So it is Christmas 2024, and Robert Eggers of The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman fame is offering us a remake of the 1922 F.W. Murnau film Nosferatu, which itself is an adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, a book that came out 25 years earlier. Now, Murnau didn't want to pay the rights to the Stoker story in order to make the film, so that's why he called it Nosferatu and not Dracula. And all the characters' names are changed, but essentially it is the same story. A young, recently married real estate agent travels a fucking long time to go get a signature for a sale of a new house from a notorious recluse, the titular Nosferatu slash Dracula. Meanwhile, this dude had established a telepathic connection with the real estate agent's new wife. And he uses the pretext of this sale to travel and get closer to her. Let's just say be with her. What is it about her that's so special? Who the fuck knows? Now, in terms of the differences between the Nosferatu and Dracula stories, there basically aren't any. I haven't seen the other films for a while, but it's literally the same story beat for beat. In Dracula, when Dracula bites your neck, you also become a vampire, which doesn't happen in Nosferatu. And he's also able to control Mina, the main female characters, her thoughts and her actions a bit more telepathically, as opposed to the Ellen character in Nosferatu, where he's sort of just haunting her. She still has like agency and she can do whatever she wants. And Nosferatu isn't aware of what she's kind of planning to kind of get him. He's not in her thoughts in that sense. Dracula has also always been presented to us as this like refined, suave, handsome figure, and Nosferatu is more like gross and creepy. Nosferatu is also linked to a plague that kills a bunch of people, and killing everyone isn't necessarily Dracula's goal. He's more interested in like control and power. But anyway, like I said, I haven't seen these movies in a while, and I have a really shit memory, so don't take my word for it. Essentially, it's the same story. So when you say Robert Eggers has remade Nosferatu, you could also technically say Robert Eggers has remade Dracula because the source material is the same. But obviously the original Nosferatu from 1922 was made before there was ever a Dracula film. So technically in the film world, Nosferatu came first. The first Dracula movie with Bela Lugosi was in 1931, which is also the same year as Frankenstein, which is a monster that I was more obsessed with as a kid. I didn't see Dracula until later in my teens, and I read the book only in my 20s. I saw Francis Ford Coppola's 1992 Dracula before I saw the 1931 Dracula, and I also saw Herzog's 1979 Nosferatu before I saw the 1922 Nosferatu. So my chronology of these adaptations is all out of whack. But anyway, let's get back to 2024's Nosferatu. Why did Robert Eggers make this movie? He's clearly been obsessed with this story since he was a kid. He absolutely loves it. And like Herzog before him, he prefers the 1922 adaptation of any of the Dracula movies because it came first. And the film is also very important to the history of cinema. His adaptation is surprisingly very faithful to the original film and in a way the book. I guess that was the point, but I think you can't help but wish that he'd taken some liberties with the story. And did like a little Eggers remix on it, but that's not what we got. So if we go just by what he delivered to us, it works. It's exactly what you would expect. If you want to do something that faithful, then I wouldn't necessarily change anything about what Robert Eggers did. My issues are more with the original story. Like it's essentially like a waiting game. Nosferatu is edging throughout this movie, anticipating his meeting with Ellen, and it's like, this is a fantasy. Why can't you just go over there and fuck her already? Why does he have to buy a house and fuck with her brain before coming to get her? Why is Nosferatu slash Dracula a story about real estate? Like, who cares? Just get on a horse and come get this bitch. Jesus Christ. If you get past those frustrations, which some would say you can't. The movie looks great. The cinematography by, I don't want to butcher this name, but Jarin Bleshke is gorgeous. He was nominated for an Oscar for Eggers' The Lighthouse, which was a bit more interesting visually than Nosferatu. But he's being nominated in a few places, so people are really loving this a lot. And it's in color, but a lot of sequences are in this dark blue muted tone that kind of makes it look like it's in black and white. And I think I kind of wish the whole thing was in black and white. There was really no reason for this to be in color. I mean, if you're trying to pay homage to the original film, then why not, you know? But I think this movie, although the cinematography is great, doesn't really have that many like iconic shots like the original 1922 movie. Like specifically that shot of the shadow walking up the staircase in the original movie. Like there's nothing like that here. There's a lot of gorgeous shots, but like memorable in terms of like with the story and what's going on, I don't know. That shot of Nicholas Hoult in the forest is absolutely amazing, but like that doesn't have much to do with the story and doesn't advance anything in any way. And the shot of the shadow hand going over the city is fucking sick, but that was like done in post, so I don't know. Eggers does do his version of the shadow walking up the staircase, but it's very different and not like exactly the same visually, so it's not as iconic. And based on the trailer, I was expecting the score to like pop off a bit more, but once the movie was over, I couldn't remember anything about the score, so it clearly wasn't that memorable. What I did remember was the music from the opening scene, which is exactly the same music that's in the trailer. The production design is great. You can tell that a lot of thought was put into it, but the more memorable stuff is the outside stuff. Like I can't tell you much about the inside of Count Orlok's castle or the house that Ellen is staying in. I feel like in those rooms, the production design wasn't really the focus. There's more emphasis put on the costumes. They were all in like muted tones and they looked really great. Although there's some weird choices. Emma Corrin's wearing a hat inside the house at like weird moments, so I don't know what that was about. And some of the wigs were distracting, especially Emma Corrin's. But now for the performances. Lily Rose Depp is amazing.
She took every moment and she ate it. It was just marvelous.
For those who've seen The Idol on HBO, that doesn't really come as a shock to you because she was fucking sensational in that show. But for everyone else, it might. I read that she was inspired by Isabella Gianni's performance in Possession for some of the scenes, and I believe it. Also, speaking of Possession, the last shot in this film is very Possession-like. And that shot of Lily Rose Depp with blood on her face is also giving me Possession. So there's some Possession homages going on a bit all over the place in this, which makes sense because, like I said earlier, this is a story about possession. Nicholas Hoult is also perfectly serviceable. He's got a lot of stuff going on this year, and he's doing amazing work. Although I did have some issues with his performance in Juror Number 2, but you can go watch that video to hear about that. Emma Corrin and Aaron Taylor-Johnson are good, although they don't have much to do, really. And Willem Dafoe is Willem Dafoeing it up. Some of you might not know, but Willem Dafoe was nominated for an Oscar for his performance as Max Schreck in 2000's Shadow of the Vampire, which is a film about the production of the original Nosferatu, and the rumor that Max Schreck, the actor who played Nosferatu, was actually a real-life vampire. So if you haven't seen that, you should check it out. It's really good. And my boy Bill Skarsgård is tremendous as Count Orlok, a.k.a. Nosferatu.
But then he turned around and he came with me and he thought, what about Orlok? And I was like, what about him?
Although I have to say, I was a bit disappointed with the look of the character. Now, he doesn't look anything like Bill, obviously, which is a shame because Bill is fucking hot. But based on what I'd heard Robert Eggers say in interviews, I was expecting something a bit grosser and more disgusting.
These vampires of early folklore are, walking putrid corpses. And so then, of course, the question I ask myself is, what would a dead Transylvanian nobleman actually look like? And so with a bit of research, you get what we have on screen.
Like his face still kind of looks like a human face in a way, so it's not that scary. He is naked a lot and his body is gross, but I don't know. He also shows cock, which is kind of iconic. Nosferatu going full frontal wasn't on my 2024 bingo card, but hey, I'll take it. His voice is really fun too. But most of what's interesting about it was done in post-production. Skarsgård didn't sound anything like that on set for sure. Ultimately, my favorite Bill Skarsgård monster is still Pennywise. But that being said, I do want him to keep playing iconic monsters. I think Guillermo del Toro and Maggie Gyllenhaal should have hired him to play Frankenstein in either one of their upcoming adaptations. I think John Chu should have hired him to play Elphaba in Wicked. So what did I like about this movie? The performances, the cinematography, the costumes, the fucking posters, which are all amazing. And also the fact that Nosferatu is not biting people's necks. I'm not going to tell you what he does bite, but it's pretty fun. And all the Possession homages. Possession is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I'm a gigantic Isabella Gianni stan, so I love all of that. But another thing that bothered me was the dialogue. The script was fine, but some of the dialogue felt a bit off and clunky, especially some of the shit that Count Orlok says. It felt bizarrely like contemporary in a way. Anyway, maybe that's just me, and I can't think of like an example off the top of my head, but some of what he was saying, I was like, oh, like it felt like it took me out of the movie a little bit. So I gave the movie 3.5 stars on Letterboxd. For me, 4 stars means I would watch it again. And I don't feel I need to see this again. My boyfriend was saying last night that he wants to watch it again and see if there's anything that he missed. But I don't think there's anything left to find. I mean, this is Robert Eggers paying homage to a movie that he loves. I don't think there's any hidden meaning or anything to go look for. The story is what it is. It's a tale as old as time. We know it. We either love it or we don't. But I don't think there's maybe like some production stuff that you missed the first time around. But in terms of the story, like, we know what we just got. I was really hoping that the film would be part of my favorites of the year, but sadly, I don't think it'll crack the top 10. And again, as I said at the beginning, this isn't necessarily because of the film itself. Like it's very well made, but mostly because of my issues with the source material and the story. And as I mentioned before, in terms of Oscars, I think there's a very good chance that this would be nominated for Best Cinematography. Other than that, I don't think this will be a player. In another world, it could be nominated for Best Picture, for Best Costumes, for Best Actress, for Best Supporting Actor, but we don't live in that world. Last thing I'll say is that I think this was a really great idea to release this at Christmas. I don't think it would have been as fun if it was released in October for Halloween. Like, there's something about the Christmas release that's really cool. And I do ultimately recommend everybody go see it. But if some of you are not familiar with the story, if there's anybody left that doesn't know the story, don't expect anything too scary or any gore or action, really. It's a slow tale of possession and desire, so be warned. See you next time.
I'm ready.